Welcome to Transformative Principal, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am so excited to have Gina Davenport on the program today. She is amazing, and we're going to have a great conversation. She was the principal of a diverse suburban high school that truly was student-centered, and we're going to talk about a lot of those things. She did a lot of cool things, including dropping referrals to under 50 per year for a student population of over 1,700 students with less than 15 out-of-school suspensions each year since 2021. And she's done some really cool things, and I'm excited. Gina, welcome to Transformative Principal.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, the first thing I want to chat about is your dissertation on student voice, and you have a survey that's in the show notes at transformativeprincipal.org. We would love for each of you to go and take that survey and give some feedback. Tell people what they're going to be participating in.
It's a 5-minute survey, and my research topic is really principals' perspectives on the use of student voice as a culturally responsive practice. And so the survey is really brief, and it'll just give me some ideas of what kinds of student voice activities are happening in our secondary schools across the country.
Awesome. So right now you're like, who is this person? Why should I listen to her? Why should I go take the survey? Well, you're going to listen to the next 45 minutes or so of our conversation. You're going to say, oh, I should go do that survey because what she talked about was awesome. And so I definitely encourage you to do that after you're done listening. We'll mention it at the end again, but definitely go do that. So we will get to my interview with Gina here in just a moment. And Gina, will you talk to me about how intentionally teaching social emotional competence impacts a school environment?
Sure. I was a principal at my school for 10 years. I was a assistant principal for seven. And in my time as an administrator, I started to realize that there was a pattern with the students that were in the office for discipline issues, for behaviors. And I started to realize that the issue was they were missing something. There was a disconnect. And when you're in a school situation, when you're a teacher or an administrator and a student is struggling with reading, you provide all kinds of reading interventions to that student. When a student is struggling with their multiplication tables, as educators, we know exactly what to do to support that student. But when it comes to behaviors and self-regulation and those types of deficits, we freeze up. We don't know what to do. We write a referral, we send them to the office, and we let somebody else take care of it. And as the person who was taking care of it, I was building really strong relationships with students who needed those relationships. But the teachers in the building were missing out, and the students were missing out on actually building the skills that they needed to be in school. I think that as kids get older, we're under that misconception that their frontal lobe is formed, right? That they understand who they are. They have developed interpersonal competencies. They know how to speak to each other. They know how to resolve conflict. They know how to advocate for themselves. And I can tell you from my experience, even our best students sometimes don't have those capacities. They've missed some of that along the way. And it's because we don't, after elementary school, we stop intentionally teaching that. So I started to do a little bit of research, and I ran into a couple of different programs, and I realized that there wasn't a whole lot out there for secondary kids. A lot of stuff for elementary school students, some things that have been adapted for middle school kids. And a lot of times it's laborious, and it's something that teachers at the secondary level don't want to do. I mean,
And
I have teachers that, I'm sorry, go
and
ahead.
why don't they want to do it, Gina? Because they, one, feel like it's not their job. They feel like kids should already know it. And then third, I think this is the big one, is they feel like there's not a good way to teach it, which is ironic because the best way to teach it is through these relationships, these conversations, talking about difficult things that you were just explaining about.
At the high school level, a science teacher majored in chemistry, right? So they know chemistry and that's what they want to teach. Or they know literature and they want to teach Beowulf every year over and over again ad nauseum, right? But teaching the whole child and thinking about producing a product, a graduate that actually has all of these skills is they're in a silo, right? I'm an English teacher. I'm a social studies teacher. I'm a phys ed teacher. That's not my responsibility. And they don't have the tools. And I think we push away the things that we're not familiar with, and I don't think that in teacher education programs at the secondary level, there's a lot of conversation about social emotional competencies and what kids need to know. But I can tell you that if you ask employers why people lose their jobs, it's not because they don't know the Pythagorean theorem. People lose their jobs because they can't get along with other people at work, or they miss deadlines, or they don't know how to set goals, or they don't follow through on things, or they don't advocate for themselves. Those are all social emotional skills that we need to be intentional about. So that's why we decided that we were going to do that. And when I say we, I mean we. Before I could launch a program that was going to be so kind of not intuitive to high school, I had to make sure that I got a core group of leaders that were going to kind of take this up and say, yeah, we believe in this. We believe in this. So what I did was we did a book study on the formative five, and we read that book as a leadership team. And when I say leadership team, I'm not just talking about department chairs in a high school. I'm talking about those individuals in the building that have personal power, not just the position, but they have that personal power where they are credible with their colleagues, and they're kind of kid magnets, right? So it's people that could influence other people in the building. And we read this book, and then I had somebody from the student service office come in and do specific professional development on social emotional learning. She happened to be a former elementary school counselor who, of course, that was her thing. And she kind of broke it down for us and showed us what the competencies were. And then we kind of developed our own program in-house to meet those needs. And we got kids involved in the building of the program. We got faculty involved in the building of the program just to get that buy-in. And then we launched a social emotional program for our students and saw some really great results.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second, but I want to go back to the Formative Five by Tom Herr, which is a book that I've read also, and interviewed Tom about that book on this show. There's a link to our interview in the show notes. And when he and I were talking about this, I remember saying on the show that I was like, these are the only five things that really matter if we actually teach them, because it honestly doesn't matter if we teach Beowulf or the Pythagorean theorem or anything else that's in our content area. What matters is that we teach our students to become good, flourishing human beings. And if we can do that, then we're going to find success, and we're going to help them do anything else that they need to do in their lives. But if we don't teach them how to be good people, and I will add, it's not our responsibility to teach them, it's our responsibility to help parents teach them, because that is ultimately the parents' responsibility, and we are just helpers in that, which a lot of educators get a little perturbed when I say that, but it really is the parents' job, and we just help. So we need to be aware of that and supportive of that also. So let's talk about your program and what you created and what that actually looked like.
So, inspired by Tom's Formative Five, I got a group of students who were in our AVID program. We're an AVID school, advancement via individual determination, and we those kids are always talking about goal setting, and AVID is social emotional learning kind of on steroids, right? It's what social emotional learning do you need to get to college and be successful in college. So, those kids were good kids to kind of tap into, and we talked to them about the Formative Five. And then I said to them, I want you guys to come up with attributes that you think a successful student should have. What is it that a successful student should always model and demonstrate in our building? And they went to town on coming up with a list and explaining why they thought that these particular things should be included. And then they presented that to the adult leadership group, and then kind of paired them up and narrowed them down and came up with 6 what we called Arundel Attributes. And those were things that it became more of a common language for all of us to be able to use than it did really anything else. So posters had these 6 attributes on them. The teachers had them in their classrooms. We tied them all to our social emotional learning lessons that occurred once a week in our advisory period. And we just talked about these attributes. Ownership stands out as probably one of the biggest things that the kids really wanted us to consider as an attribute, and they were able to hang a lot of other things on under that umbrella of ownership. They felt like you can't be a bully if you have ownership in the school culture, right? You have to own your behavior. You have to have ownership, means you're going to take responsibility for your classroom and your classwork. You're not going to plagiarize because you're going to own your own work. You're going to put your name to it. And the kids came up with all of these operational definitions of what these words, these traits meant to them. And then we took it out to the whole student body, and we had big pieces of chart paper, and they were writing down all of the examples of when you use these attributes. And it was just a great way to kind of orient all the kids to what that's going to look like. We still do that activity now with all of our incoming ninth graders. So that's one of the first things they do, is they see a little definition of the Arundel attribute, each of the attributes, and then they're asked to brainstorm and make it what it is, use their own words to define what that looks like and what that's going to look like in school, and give examples. And
So
then what I asked,
before you go on, I want to just say real quick that the power in what you're talking about, that students helped create this, that it was specific to your school, and ownership is not one of the formative 5 that Tom talks about, right? And so the key here is that this is specific to our community, and this is so important that so many people think they can adopt somebody else's curriculum or somebody else's program and make it work. And there will always be limitations to adopting what somebody else does. And so you have to see bigger than that and adopt the principles, which are, correct me if I'm wrong, the principle is the Arundel attributes are the things that make us excellent human beings. And this is what we need to do. And if we do these things, we will be excellent human beings according to what our community standards. This fits into what we're doing. And you express this so beautifully. I wanted to stop and just put a little pin in it, because it doesn't matter what the attributes are. What matters is that you then say, you students who come in, you take these attributes and you express what they mean to you and how you individually will share that with yourself, with others, and how you'll conduct yourself in that way. And that makes a huge difference in whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, because it's about you applying, this is what our community thinks is important. Here's how I'm going to do that in my day-to-day life. That is incredibly powerful. What else would you say to that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And what we have seen is that this has become what the kids call the Arundel way. So when upperclassmen see freshmen running in the hallway, they stop them and they say, "Hey guys, this isn't the Arundel way." And then and that is so much more powerful than the teacher or the administrator stopping a ninth grader and saying that. And they're you put something out and you want it to be dynamic, you want it to be amazing, right? So we gave teachers a little icon with each of the attributes on it. We gave them button lights, and at the beginning of every lesson, when they're going over their outcome and their agenda, we want the teachers to say to the kids, which attributes are you going to apply to this lesson? And a kid might raise their hand and say, well, today I'm going to have to use courage, because you said we're going to have group work, and I don't usually like working in a group because I'm shy, but today I'm going to use my courage and I'm going to give it a try. And the teacher then lights that up to remind the kids that today we're going to be thinking about this as we're going through our lesson. And then at the end of the lesson, in the closure, the teacher says, today you guys said we were going to work on integrity, so we're all going to do our own work, but we're going to also work on courage because we have to do some interactions. How did we do on those attributes today? And there's no wrong answer when a kid says, I think we're going to use this attribute, because there's no wrong answer. So everybody has access and can come in, and then they wrap it up. So we're just continuing to use that language so that we have a common language to kind of pin our practices on. So if we're in the hall, I can say, everybody, I need everybody to get to class. Come on, the bell's going to ring. That's part of our ownership. We're going to be on time to class. And that way we're just reinforcing that. And there are times when, as an administrator, you kind of wonder if the kids are taking it to heart. Is this really Is this really part of our culture? You see glimpses of it, but is this really something that's happening? And I had the opportunity to host some executives from another school system in my building. They were having difficulty in their school with the behavior and the academic achievement of students of color. And they wanted to come into a school that was having success with all students. And my superintendent asked me if I would talk to them about the experience of the students of color. And I said that they were welcome to come to the building, but I couldn't speak to it because I'm not a student of color. So I put together a panel of kids to talk about their experiences and why they were successful. And at the end of the conversation, they had gone on a little tour of the building. The kids took them around the building. I didn't do any of the work. I palmed all that out on the students. And when they came back into the conference room, one of the guests said, I've noticed these things on the wall, and she read them out, and she said to the kids, "Can you talk to me about this?" And I thought, oh, here we go. This is the proof, right? These are juniors and seniors. They've had these attributes around for years, and now they're being asked which one speaks to them. And the responses of the kids, and I intentionally chose kids that were very academically successful and kids that were still trying to figure it out, were being successful, but were still trying to figure that out. And the responses were just, amazing. They talked about not only which one spoke to them, but why it was so important to them. One of the students talked about a situation where he was one of our football players, and he was college bound, but he also was content to not really push himself too much academically. And he said that he was in a situation where he was in the weight room with the football coach, who was also our conditioning teacher, and the AP English teacher, English lit teacher came down to the weight room and said to him, "If you're planning to go to college to play football, you have to take my class as a senior. You need this AP class. You can do it. You need to take it because it's going to help you be ready for the writing you're going to have to do and the reading you're going to have to do in college." And he said to her, I'm not trying to do that at this point. I'm going to be a senior next year. I'm not trying to work that hard. And she said, "Oh, no, I'm telling you, you're going to take the class." And he turned to the football coach and he said to him, "Coach Walsh, do you hear what Miss Yuskavage is saying?" And he said, "Yeah, I heard her say you're going to take this class." And he was saying when he finally took ownership of his academic success, he was proud to tell everyone that he had just taken the exam. He thinks that he got a 4 because he had gotten a 4 on a pre-exam. And he really feels like he's ready for college because he was bullied into taking the class by the teacher who believed in him and cared for him enough to say, "Hey, this is what you need to do." And when he was willing to take ownership, and so that was the story that he used to explain what ownership meant to him and why he felt like that was important. And I mean, I was just so proud because when the kids can not only generalized it, but have also internalized it to the point where they see how it benefits them in their lives, that's when you know that a program that you've started is successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about that story also is that you also shared how they apply it to their lives on a regular basis, daily, maybe even every lesson, so that when those times come to share, they have a whole list of things to share. And what's so amazing is so often in education we have students give their responses to the teacher as though it matters to the teacher. Well, it doesn't. It only matters to the student, right? And so a student could go through 4 years at your school saying or hearing and talking about these how the Arundel attributes are going to show up in every one of their classes and never say anything to the teacher, but still have a transformative experience for them because they're thinking about it, they're reflecting on it, and they're seeing how it's working for them. And this is, to me, the beauty of this type of teaching is that it's not about showing proficiency to the adult or to the people in charge. It's about your own personal development, and only you really know where you're at with that. And that's something that we don't know how to grapple with in education because everything has to be based on evidence and what we can see and not see and all that. And I think that's one of those little things that as we understand that better over time, we're going to see how that really does matter in a powerful way for every one of the people that we work with, students and teachers alike.
And I think that the shame in that is that you're right, you can't quantify it, right? It's all anecdotal information. That personal growth of a student doesn't always show up on the state report card. We don't always get credit as an administrator for that particular metric, right? Because we're looking at attendance rates and we're looking at academic achievement. But I would argue that investing the time in this kind of thing does show up on that report card, right? Because kids are coming to school because they feel a sense of belonging, because they're taught to advocate for themselves. They don't have to lie to a teacher, because when they tell the teacher the truth, the teacher respects that and responds in kind, right? So when you build that kind of a community, it does pay off on all those other metrics that are the hard data that I hate to use the word judged, but that schools and faculties and kids are judged on, right? But this is something that impacts all of those areas, sometimes in a very subtle way, but it's powerful, and it really impacts individual kids, and that really should be our business, is growing students to make them as I don't want to say functional, because that makes it sound like that there's a time when they're dysfunctional, but makes them whole, makes them, the entire package, so that they can be successful when they're on their own at college, or when they're in the workplace, or in relationships that they're going to have. These skills are important. We used to call them soft skills. There's nothing soft about them. They're the real skills, as you said. That this is where the rubber meets the road. And I
Yeah.
would argue that this is what makes kids, people, successful. And I think when I look back at why do some kids have the capacity and some kids don't, I worked with a group of boys my first year as principal, and they were the kids that were in the hallways all the time. They were not academically successful, and I really didn't know how to help them. So I talked to them, and I asked them what it was about the school that they didn't like, or what was preventing them from being successful. And the things that they were telling me, the things that connect kids to school, like being on a team in a high school. Well, they're not eligible to be on a team because of their grades, right? Going on field trips as a group. Well, they didn't get to go on the field trips because either they were left behind because of behaviors, or they just forgot to bring in their permission slip because their executive functioning wasn't functioning that week, right? Participating in clubs and community service kinds of activities. They didn't get to do any of those things. And those are the places where social emotional learning occurs. That's where these things happen. You learn to take turns, and you learn teamwork by being on a team. And if you've never had that experience and you're 17 years old, you're at a deficit. And a lot of kids didn't have those experiences because they had single parents, or their parents were working multiple jobs to make ends meet, or they were living with a grandparent that was older and couldn't get them to different places. So I made it a point to put these kids in a club and give them purpose and take them on trips and do things with them. And that was life changing for them. We went to a local place where Johns Hopkins is one of the hospitals in Baltimore that has a huge children's center. And there's a lot of people come from out of state, out of the country, to have their children treated there. And there's an organization that provides housing to parents at a very low cost when they're in town because their kids are receiving treatment. And one of the things that this organization does is it allows groups to come in and prepare a meal for the families, and then kind of like have like a cafeteria style meal, and sit and eat with these families who are going through probably the most difficult time of their lives. And these boys created a meal. They planned the menu. They went to grocery shopping. They went up to the residents with me and a couple other people. They created the food, and they were shocked at the people's response to them, because they were thanking them, and they were so appreciative, and they were telling stories, and my boys were playing with the siblings of the children that were in care. And one of the students said to me, "I've never had somebody so genuinely thank me before. I've never had this experience." He was really uncomfortable because this. It just was new. It was so new to him, and that was really eye opening to me. That changed me as a leader to realize that we look at kids that have these deficits, and sometimes we blame them for the deficits when really they just haven't had the opportunities. And when we give them the opportunity to love and extend themselves and to do other things, to plan events. They planned a faculty student basketball game to raise money for that charity, to be able to buy the food to get. They did the whole thing, and to have that leadership responsibility. Those are things that they didn't have. And were they connected to school? Absolutely. From that point on, they were connected. They were bought in. They felt like they were contributors to something bigger than themselves, and they had never had that chance before. So sometimes it's just providing an opportunity, to exercise some of these social emotional competencies that really can spark something in a student.
Yeah, and what I love about that story is that you were illustrating that kids who are struggling don't get the experiences that help them learn resilience and learn these other skills that they need to have. They don't get an opportunity to have ownership because they don't have choices, because their bad decisions have taken away their options for choices, and that is tragic, right? And we have the power to change that with ourselves. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about also is this idea of how COVID actually was a positive. Now, in my own family, COVID was like the best thing that could have happened. And I know it was tragic and a lot of people suffered and a lot of people don't agree with that. But again, this goes back to this thing that we've been talking about, that it's about the individual and how they deal with it. And so talk about how COVID really was the launching point for your best years at Arundel High School.
So I'm going to be honest with you. My school spirit and the connections in the school and the relationships were the kind of the gel that held it all together for us, right? Like us being in community with each other was the stuff. And then when all of a sudden we're told we're going to be, for the next umpteen months, we're going to be quarantined, we're going to be in our own homes doing this thing called school on virtual, on cameras and all that kind of thing. I was really concerned about losing that stickiness, losing that connection with the kids, with the faculty, and so I really had to be intentional and purposeful in trying to come up with ways that we could stay connected. My coaches and my teachers did amazing things with TikTok and social media, where a kid would be throwing a baseball and then the next baseball player would catch it and throw it, because all the kids were taking their own videos, and then somebody would splice it all together so it looked like we were together doing drills and that kind of thing. I mean, and we were trying to come up with any way that we could be together. And I would have optional faculty meetings once a week, and my whole faculty would show up. So there'd be 100 people on my Google screen looking like little tiny pixels, and we would just be talking about a win that we had that week. And so somebody would say, "Hey, Johnny finally turned on his camera," and it was something simple like that. But just hearing each other's voices became so important. What it did for me personally in my leadership was it really gave me the opportunity, the quiet time, to really galvanize my thinking around what was important to me as a leader and how I was going to make that be part of the vision of the school. So when we had the opportunity to come back, we sat down and we talked about the things that we really needed to work on, like equity and making sure that all kids felt comfortable and connected in our schools, not just our athletes that could make TikTok videos, not just our band kids that had that connection, but what did we need to do to make sure that everybody felt safe and at home in our school. And I think because we all had the same lived traumatic experience, we could kind of rally around that and take comfort in each other and really make something amazing happen after that. When we finally got kids back in the building, for the first 2 weeks of school, I put a moratorium on any academics, any schoolwork. And at first I thought that was going to be the pushback was going to be terrible. But what I wanted to do in those 2 weeks was I wanted kids to go to their classes and get used to listening to bells ring again, get used to moving through the halls, get used to the schedule, and just do team building activities in the classroom. And we really front loaded a lot of our SEL work and a lot of our conversations around the attributes, and a lot of our conversations about what we do in school and how we interact with each other, because it was going to be new again. And there were half of my students had never been in my building because they had spent the whole year in COVID. So we had a lot of teaching to do about the Arundel way and how we were going to, move through the halls and interact with each other. The words that we weren't going to say, we're not going to use the N word in the school because it could harm someone. And we're not going to use any language that can harm someone, even if we're using it as friends. We're not going to use it here at school because somebody else that overhears it could be harmed. And if our behavior can harm anyone, then it's not behavior for school. And it worked. It worked. It really got the kids back to school on the right foot. So much to the point where every year since, we have done the first week of school, no academics. We do the team building. We do the SEL lessons. We do the getting to know you, get to know the routines for everyone, because we need that. We just need that time to build community. We do a lot of community circles where we ask a simple question and we go around the room and we give everybody the opportunity to give an answer, just so we get to know each other. It's really hard to be a jerk with somebody that you care about. And that's our counter to social media, because that anonymity of social media can give kids a lot of freedom to be really nasty to each other. But if you're in community with each other and you share this common experience of school, and you love your school and you love what we're doing and you belong there, you don't want to be separated from that. You don't want to be outside the community. And that really goes a long way when you're trying to manage and lead large groups of people. It works with teachers too. Teachers are much nicer to each other, much more collaborative and cooperative with each other, because we've had that shared experience of COVID and not being able to be together. I think it makes you really appreciate what you have when you don't have it for a year plus.
Yeah, exactly. And before COVID, when I was a principal still, I did the first 3 days where students didn't even have schedules, and we didn't allow them to go to classes. We wanted them to get to know everybody in the school, not just who their teachers were. And so we assigned them like mentors, teacher mentors, who would be working with them. But those kids may not have that teacher as one of their teachers later. And it set up this really cool opportunity for kids to get to know different teachers, get to know different students, and like you said, it's hard to be a jerk when you care. That's going to be the show title, by the way. I think that's great. And
Yeah, it's hard to be a jerk when you care. For our ninth grade, our system gives us the first day of school is only ninth graders, only sixth graders in middle schools, and so we take our ninth graders, and I tell parents, your kid's going to come home and tell you wild stories, because this is what we're going to do. They come in, they go to the auditorium, and we have what I tell them is the first graduation rehearsal, where we read every student's name. They cross the stage, they sign a pledge, a big banner that's a pledge to graduate with their class. Then they're given their first piece of high school gear. Our school colors are Kelly green and white. So Kelly green is pretty different. A lot of schools are red, a lot of schools have a shade of blue, but Kelly green is Kelly green. And they get their first Kelly green shirt that has their graduation year on it. They come down the stage and they shake my hand and I welcome them to school. And then they go on a scavenger hunt, and teachers don't take them. We have students that we call AMPs, which is our Arundel mentor program. And those upperclassmen come in on that day when they don't have to. And they are the ones who take the kids around the building and show them all the different places that all the different the library, the gym, the weight room, all the different places. They do that. They walk through their schedule just so they can find where their classes are, because that's an anxiety thing for kids, is where am I going to go tomorrow? So the upperclassmen take them to do that. And then they have lunch. And then we have an ice cream social and a pep rally. So I say to the parents, when your kids come home and say we played all day, we did. So don't call them a liar, because this is what we're going to do, because we want them to have their first experience to be really positive and really friendly, and where they're just meeting people and they can feel a little bit relaxed. And then those AMPs, those mentors that are assigned to them, stay with them all year and go back into their advisory classrooms. And those AMPs actually teach the lessons, the social emotional lessons, to the ninth graders with the teacher there as backup. So instead of you hearing about goal setting from somebody that's 50 years old. You're hearing about it from a junior in school that is talking about how when they started doing this, their grades went up, which is much more powerful than hearing it from me. And that's been very successful, is having those upperclassmen. It gives those kids a leadership opportunity, and then it gives the ninth graders some upperclassmen to know when they're at the game, or they're at the dance. They can identify a couple people that they know and they're comfortable with. It's all about building relationships.
Yeah, man, that's so powerful. And you've obviously done that, and we just barely scratched the surface in talking about all these different things that you've done. And so I'm going to change gears a little bit, because there was some controversy earlier this year with how you left the school. You retired from the school, and there was a music video that was recorded at the school that got national attention, and that video has hundreds of thousands of views, probably even millions at this point. And it was definitely inappropriate for that kind of a music video to be in a school, especially shot in a
Absolutely.
school. And you didn't comment on the news article about that. It looked like, from when I read that back in the spring, when I didn't know you, I was like, it sounds like this principal knew about it and like set it up, and it made you out to be the bad person, which now that I've talked to you and learned from you, I'm like, no, I don't think that's the case. So can you talk a little bit more about that experience, and whatever you'd like to share about how it went down and how you felt about it, and all that?
Sure. One of the things that I pride myself on as a leader was having the trust of my students. And a lot of people have asked me, how do you build trust among your faculty, or how do you build trust around your student body? And the way that you build trust is by trusting. So, and sometimes when you trust people, you're disappointed. And that's just the way that it is. This was a former student who, over the week prior, was working with an assistant principal to try to get into the building to do this, and was being told no, that they had to come up with a storyboard. And we knew this student. We knew he thinks of himself as an influencer. I don't know a lot about social media, but I know enough to know that the more likes you get, the more views you get, the more status you have. And this young man was about status, and that is not a new thing for him. That was the case when he was a student as well. So he had gotten into the building to talk to me about it. When he was not prepared with his storyboard, I knew that he was intentionally not showing me things because he knew I would not approve. So that was the end of it for me. He stayed in the building and let people in a back door, and made this music video that then dropped, and did all this thing. It happened to coincide with the superintendent's decision to move 30 principals and assistant principals throughout the system.
Wow,
So,
that was missing from the article.
of course, yeah, that was not part of the article. So prior to any of this happening, I had already been told that I was being moved to a different school. And I had already made the decision, with the help of my husband, that to go start over at my age, with the passion that I have for the work, was probably not in my best interest, and not something that I was looking for in my career. I was probably at that point a year or two from retirement. And my husband and I were debating whether I would take the new position or would retire. And then this incident occurred. And so it looked to people, because it was not, when the documents came out that said, this principal is moving to this school, this principal is moving to this school, this principal is moving to this school. A new principal was put in my school, but there was no information given about where I was going. So that gave the press the thought that I was being moved, or I was being let go because of the video. And so they kind of went with that, because that was now the new sensational story after the video had gone out. And when you're a principal and things are said in the press, you're instructed to not comment, to not put things out there. And so it was really difficult to watch. The same thing happens on social media. When you make a decision about something in school that one or two parents don't like, they start to put stuff out on social media, and then it starts to gain traction. And usually it comes from people that are outside of the community that just see something on social media and want to jump on the bandwagon, and they're insulting you and they don't even know you. And so what was happening on social media was the people in my school community were saying she would never let this happen. This is not who she is, that, but I couldn't go on social media to say that. I couldn't go to the news and say that. So the kids, of course, who want more clicks, want more sensationalism, they want more notoriety, they were perpetuating the story. And the press, who unfortunately now also need more clicks, right? Because the news industry is different than it was 20 years ago when people bought a subscription to the newspaper. So it became a sensationalized story. And it grew legs, and my school system said in one small line, Miss Davenport moved from Arundel, has nothing to do with the video. But that kind of fell on deaf ears. I don't know that people necessarily read all the way down to the fourth paragraph,
Yeah. Too
where,
little,
in
too
the third
late.
sentence, right, said that. So, I took that on the chin. It did not impact my decision to retire. I was retiring. I had made that decision before the video. It solidified that decision. But I will say that, my mistake in all of it was I didn't escort the young man out of the building, right? I should have, on that Friday afternoon, I should have said to him, nope, you got to go, and I'm going to walk you out and watch him walk to his car. I did not do that. I trusted that when he left my office, he was going to go do what he said he was going to go do. And I was wrong for that. I should have escorted him out of the building. I have been in situations where visitors have left my office without escort, and I'm sure that happens everywhere. But in this case, it did turn around to bite me.
So, Gina,
But
let me ask you, what advice would you have for a principal who's going through something like this, where the media is out there and there's a lot of pressure on them? What would you say in response? Like, how should they handle themselves? What should they focus on? How do they stay sane? Because I've been through this also, and it's scary. What
yeah,
would you
it's
say?
it's really hard. It's scary, and it's hard, and it kind of takes your breath away. The way that I got through it was the people that know me and know my work were very supportive, which was all of my colleagues, teachers, parents in my community were very supportive. There were people that were nasty, and people that were reading this from out of the state that would call and insist on talking to me and then say horrible things. But that passes, and with every person that was supportive, I was reminded of the body of work that stands behind me. Now, does it bother me that if people Google my name, that's probably the first thing that they'll see that pops up? Yeah, that bothers me, because there's a lot of articles out there that talk about great things that happen with kids, and great things that came out of my school. I even got to talk to Larry King, and there's that interaction with Larry King is somewhere in the archives of the internet. So yeah, it bothers me that that's the first thing that pops up, but it doesn't define my career, because I won't let it define my career. And if I helped a couple hundred kids, maybe a couple thousand, because of the trust relationship I had with them, and I was burned by one, then I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, because trust is really important when you're a high school administrator in any setting. It's really important, and it's something that we don't invest enough time in, and that's what we really need to make a difference for kids. So I wouldn't change anything about my career. I would have walked him out of my building, but as far as anything else, and for other people that go through this, just know your truth,
Hmm.
and hold on to that, and and hope that your school system and the people around you are going to support you, because they know your truth too.
Yeah, for sure. That's really powerful, and I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that. Nobody ever wants to bring those difficult things up, but I also have a link to your Larry King conversation as well, a link to the YouTube video, so we'll try to get some more clicks on that as well. And Gina, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And I just want to remind everybody, as you're listening, please go check out her survey as she's working on her doctorate, which we
I
talked
am.
about when we
My
talked about
doctorate is
that.
on student voice.
Yeah.
So
So we want to hear your comments on that, or she wants to hear your comments on that. I won't see it, but I will read her dissertation when it's done, because I'm working on my doctorate also, and I'm going to ask her to send it to me.
and
So
we're going to stay in touch.
that's right, we sure are. So link to that in the show notes. Make sure you go take that survey. And thank you again, Gina, for being part of
You're
Transformative
welcome.
Principal.
You're welcome. This was really fun. Thank you.